Good morning to you, and welcome back to my Accounting 1120 discussions on corporations. My goal today is to discuss with you the accounting for stock dividends. And there are two types of stock dividends that we'll end up looking about. First, large stock dividends. Large stock dividend is considered to be greater than 20 to 25% of the outstanding stock. And then small stock dividends. And the small stock dividend is one that is less than 20 to 25% of the outstanding stock. And what a stock dividend is when you issue a dividend in stock instead of cash. And the size of it depends on how many shares you have outstanding. If you have 1,000 shares outstanding, issuing less than 200 to 250 would be considered small, and issuing more than that would be considering large. Since you're being given a range, we will of course avoid that range in our accounting discussions, so it'll always be clear to you which one you're supposed to pick. The reason there is a range is so that the person who's doing the accounting can decide if they think there's going to be a big change in the market value of the stock as a result of releasing some. If they think it's going to affect the value of the stock, they'll be trying to consider it a small. If they think it's going to affect, or if they think it's not going to affect the value of the stock, they'll consider it small. If they think it is, they'll consider it large. With that, let's get started. So, I changed the tip of my writing pen because the other one seemed to be getting, hard to write with. Let's see what you think. So why would you issue a stock dividend? Let's start with a little theory, shall we? Why would you issue a stock dividend? There's some good answers. First of all, you might not have cash, but you still want to issue a dividend. So you might be cash poor, but you want to maintain a dividend history. Nothing does more to support the price of a stock than to show it regularly pays a dividend. You also might be trying to reduce the price your stock's selling for on the market. You know, it's an inhibitor. It's great when your value of your stock goes up and up, but then it can be an inhibitor. People will quit buying it if it costs too much. Mentality of I'd rather buy two that cost 50 than one that costs 100. There's some holes in that logic, but price gets too high on your stock, it inhibits its selling. And you also just plain might want to reward your investors. You want to give them some of your stock, tell them thank you for investing in them. So lots of reasons you might want to issue a stock dividend. I think part of it comes from the effect it has on the business. Let's look at the balance sheet. Balance sheet equation. And look at what happens when you have a cash dividend. When you have a cash dividend, your assets go down, and in the end, retained earning goes down, and you are permanently smaller. What happens when you have a stock dividend is quite different. Get our balance sheet back up here. What happens is, remember, you have two big sections in stockholders' equity. The paid-in capital section, where you put money that you've received from your owners, and retained earnings, where you keep money, well, it's not money, where you keep the income that you have made over the years and haven't paid out in dividends. The stock dividend capitalizes part of retained earnings and puts it up and paid in capital. There is no change in assets and there is no change in liabilities. So with the stock dividend, you just arrange things, and total capital remains unchanged. It's equal to what it was before you started. So a cash dividend makes you permanently smaller, but a stock dividend doesn't do that. It just rewards your stockholders. There are 3 dates that are important in all dividend declarations, and they have the same 3 dates that are important in stock dividends. There's the date of declaration. Can you remember them? There's the date of record, making a list, checking it twice. Oh, stop, Christmas is so close. And then there's the date of payment. And the stock dividend entries are a little bit different, as you would imagine, than the cash dividend entries. On the date of record, or on the date of declaration, the stock dividend does not create a liability because it doesn't take assets to pay it off. It doesn't decrease net assets. You still debit retained earnings. But you don't credit a dividends payable account. You can do a little bit of abbreviation. You credit common stock dividends distributable, and this is a common stockholders equity account. It's a temporary account in that it only lasts until you distribute the dividend, but it goes in common stockholders equity, and stock goes in here, the amount goes in the par value of the distribution. If it's a small dividend, you might have a paid in capital from in excess of par from common stock, but that's only if it's a small dividend. A large dividend won't have that. I point that out now, and I'll show you more about that later. So you may have that. On the date of record, you make the list, and that's it. There is no journal entry. You make a list of who's going to get it. And on the date of payment, you take your common stock dividend distributable account and debit it because you're distributing it, and credit common stock and release the stock. At this point, you'll recall that we put it into common stock dividend distributable at par value, and so it fits nicely into the common stock account. So those are the entries, with this portion being applicable only to a small dividend. So, let's start our discussions then by looking at what happens when you have dividends. We'll start with a small dividend, and then we'll move our way to a large dividend and summarize. And I think in the accounting for it, you'll see some of what we've talked about come to pass. Let's then start with a small stock dividend. I'm showing you what the stockholders' equity section looks like for our example. Remember, stockholders' equity has 2 big sections: paid in capital, where you record money received from investors, and then retained earnings. In our example, we're going to have common stock, and the common stock is going to have a par value of $10 a share. And we're going to have some paid in capital in excess of par from common stock. Our common stock, let's say, has $10,000 in it. Our paid in capital in excess of par has $30,000 in it. So our total paid in capital section, stockholders' equity, is $40,000. Our retained earnings, let's just say it's 50,000. So our total stockholders' equity, for our example, is $90,000. That's where we start this example. And let's assume that we issue a 10% dividend. First thing you need to be able to do is tell me how many shares of stock I have outstanding. Well, I have $10,000 in my common stock account. And par value is 10. So that tells me I have 1,000 shares outstanding. If I'm going to issue a 10% dividend, I'll take the 1,000 shares outstanding and times that by 10%, and the size of my stock dividend will be 100 shares that I'm going to issue. So 10% of my outstanding shares would be the equivalent of a small stock dividend. Let's further assume that on the day I do this, the market value of this stock is $40 a share. That's what it's trading for on the market today. As you'll recall from my discussion, my goal then is to transfer some money to capitalize some dollars from, it's not money really, it's dollars, take out of retained earnings and put into paid-in capital, leaving the total unchanged. And since it's small, it will happen at market value. And we're going to issue 100 shares times $40 a share. So I should be moving $4,000 out of retained earnings and paid-in capital if I do this right. We have 3 important dates we need to take care of. The first one is that date of declaration. And in this case, we're going to say debit retained earnings to the market value, the stock. So we're going to debit retained earnings for the total price of $4,000. And we're going to credit common stock dividend distributable. It's a lot to write. I hope you don't mind if I abbreviate. Common stock dividend distributable. And recall, we only hit that for par value when it's 100 shares that we're distributing. Par value is 10, so we'll put 1,000 shares in common stock dividend distributable, and then into paid-in capital in excess of par from common stock, whatever the difference is. So this happened at par value into common stock, and the difference went to paid-in capital. The next thing that happens is our date of record. And on our date of record, all we do is make a list of who owns the stock on that day, and they're the ones that will get it. Usually there's about a 3-week span between date of declaration and date of record. Final entry is going to be date of issue, not really a date of payment. I'm going to go with date of issue in my description. And I'm going to take it out of common stock dividend distributable at the amount I put in, and I'm going to issue common stock. Remember, it's $10 par value, so this is all happening at par value. 100 shares, so it'll be the $1,000, so I'm distributing this part of the dividend with this entry. And that shows you the 3 entries for a stock dividend. Now, I'd like to do a comparison of stockholders' equity section of the balance sheet before we issued this dividend and after. Hold on, you don't need to sit and watch while I write all this. Let's take a quick look at before. I have the two sections of my balance sheet, paid in capital and retained earnings for stockholders' equity. My common stock before, as shown above, was $10,000, paid in capital of $30, totaled $40. Retained earnings is $50, coming together to equal $90,000. Let's see what it looks like after. So after the dividend, my paid-in capital will have more common stock. It started at $10,000, and as a result of this entry, it went up by $1,000, so it will be at $11,000. Paid-in capital in excess of par started at $30,000. It went up $1,000 as a result of these entries. Or it went up $3,000. Let's get it right. It went up $3,000 as a result of these entries. So it'll be $33,000. So my total paid-in capital section will be $44,000. Retained earnings was $50, but it will have gone down $4, so it will be $46,000. And add the two together, and you'll see it's still $90,000. And the only thing that has happened is I have capitalized the market value of my stock and taken it up into the paid-in capital section of my balance sheet. That's a small stock dividend.